Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our next topic is ethics. We all need good ethics, and we have two speakers to talk to you about ethics. Our first one is Christy Miller, who is a business development liaison for Learning Services Georgia, which is a Collage rehabilitation partner. Collage is a provider of post-acute neurobehavioral neurorehabilitation supported living. That's kind of a tongue twister. On an outpatient home and community services basis. They handle traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, and other medically complex diagnoses. Previously, Christy was with Restore Neurobehavioral Center as a clinical evaluator specializing in neurobehavioral rehabilitation. Christy holds a Master of Science from Jacksonville State University in Applied Clinical Psychology and is a licensed psychological technician in the state of Alabama. Your next speaker is Susie Braden, who is the Director of Workers' Compensation Claims for Encompass Health, which was formerly known as Health South Corporation. They're headquartered here in Birmingham. Encompass Health is the nation's largest provider of post-acute rehabilitation services with 28,000 employees in over 150 hospitals across 35 states, including Puerto Rico. Susie graduated from Jacksonville State University, earned her Certified Workers' Compensation Professional CWCB certificate in March of 2016, and graduated with her MBA from the University of Alabama in May of 2021. Both of these speakers are past AWCO presidents and are both actively still involved. So please give it up for Christy and Susie.
All right. So the guy just actually mic'd me up and said, I'm not really sure, you know, it's got to be up here so you can hear you. And I'm pretty sure most of you could hear me without the mic. Okay. So if it gets too loud, go back there and tell that guy. So ethics is the topic at each one of these conferences that everybody needs, but most of us dread because they tend to be dry, sometimes a little monotonous.
I understand about.
Yes, and so they have given this to us too. So at least Susie mentioned earlier that maybe we could be the female version of Fred and Clay. Now, I don't know how to take that.
Well, let's just say Dumb and Dumber.
I'll take Clay and Fred.
That's what I thought.
So today, the biggest actual ethical dilemma that everybody in this place is going to face is, do you sit in class or do you go to the mall? And
Or go eat.
all the people that just laughed have had that thought at some point during the day. It's like, well, I'm really supposed to be in class, but I could go to the mall. And that's kind of an example of how we all at work, personally, in our family life, we all have ethical dilemmas that we run into. And at this conference, historically, we've had discussions about that were very legally based, legal ethics, but workers' compensation claims are not managed just by lawyers or just by adjusters. It's a very much a team effort. You have the employer that is a part of the team. You have an adjuster who is a part of the team. We have case management that helps coordinate what we're doing. You have the attorneys, and then you have providers. And each one of those individual groups has its own laws and ethics that it has to adhere to. And sometimes those codes of ethics, those morals and principles that you're guided by, can come into conflict with those of the other disciplines. And so what Susie and I are going to talk about today are each one of those groups and hopefully how we can all work together to stay within our ethical right place, good place, but also do what's right for our injured workers, which would be our ultimate goal. is to service the need of the injured worker and get them back to the highest level of functioning as possible.
So as she pointed out, everybody has kind of their own ethical standards that they have to follow, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a certified case manager, the nurse, all that goes along down the path. So as Christy and I were preparing for this talk, one of the things that came up is the number one in the medicine world: do no harm. Clearly, we all try to do something to prevent accidents from the employer side of things. But when we get to this point, do no harm kind of needs to be the overarching theme. So from the employer perspective, we may not necessarily have an ethical code to follow by, but everybody should be ethical, as Christy pointed out. So as we go down this path, everybody in the work comp employer world should be thinking about how you train the people that handle the injured workers. So in my case, me and my team who's sitting here with me talk about making sure we report claims. We've all heard those terrible stories from some employer that discourages reporting. The first words out of my mouth, I'd rather know about the claim today than to get the notice of appearance and get the other side of it. So with that being said, that's our first boundary of ethics that we have to look at. Do we report the claim? Do we not report the claim? Yes. Then we should report it timely. Let's not sit on it. Let's make sure we're doing the right thing, being transparent, making sure the injured worker knows where to go for medical treatment. Because then what happens? They go to the doctor, they come back with a medical bill and they hand it to you. So then you're like, uh-oh. So we don't want any of those uh-ohs. So making sure we're doing that right and upfront. And by the way, I know there's a lot of adjusters in this room, and I don't see one of them trained me on how to do the right thing, making sure we're doing the right thing out of the box. So sometimes in the adjuster role, you get to train those of us who need the training. So understanding that communication is going to be an overarching theme in our conversations, because communication, if it's not clear and concise, and if you leave a little gray area, can become unethical. And what you put in writing in your communication can become a problem for you too. Me and my team are big on talking about supporting recovery. So making sure that as you're supporting that employee through that process, talking about recovery is very important. Making sure that you talk about the things that they need to know to bring down that anxiety. You know, making sure the approved provider is in on the right path that you're on. Having a provider that's not on the same page as you can create you problems. So with that being said, you want to make sure that your adjuster is on the same page with you. Adjuster, as Christy mentioned, all of us are a team. And Christy gets to work with adjusters, she gets to work with employers. So we see it across the board. Making sure that we're working in the same boat, rowing in the same direction is super important, because sometimes that's when things come off the rails. Go ahead. I see.
Well, no, I mean, if you think about it, so for those of you that don't know, Susie and I went to the same college, didn't know each other. We worked for the same company, didn't know each other. And so there's a period of about 20 years there where we were in the same place at the same time, but didn't know each other, both in social sciences, by the way, but somehow ended up managing workers' compensation claims. So there's a few of you in here that took that kind of sideways route. This is not where you started, but it's where you ended. And so being able to kind of take your background and put it into a place where you can effectively communicate with people of other disciplines. Communication is actually the one characteristic, if you can develop good communication within a team, that will make whatever that team is doing successful. You know, so it doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter the background of the injured worker or the employee. If you're able to communicate effectively, then that claim's probably going to be successful, and it's certainly ethical.
Agreed. And the first thing that we always hear is nobody told me, or I didn't hear that, or I didn't get that. So I know sometimes we feel like we beat people on the head with the information and they still don't absorb it. But as long as you're doing your part, you've ethically stepped up to the plate. In our process, the next step in the workers' comp continuum is the interaction with the adjuster. The adjuster's job is to build trust. and communicate and teach about the process. If the adjuster doesn't do that, then we fumbled. You have to realize that person is putting their livelihood in that adjuster's hands. And that has to be pretty scary, quite honestly. Because you don't know where your money's coming from. You don't know what's going to happen next. And if it's your medical care, you're driving the boat. You're always going to know that you're going to go to this doctor, you're going to do this. And you have to get that comfortability, that anxiety that they're like, oh God, what's next? And that communication can be that. But part of that communication is doing that prompt investigation. As an employer, one of the things that irritates me is the 24-hour contact. I monitor that probably more than I monitor almost anything else. Is I want to know that my employee is being reached out to, or my HRD is being reached out to, which is HR director in my world, sorry. Because sometimes my HR directors, they wear 17 different hats. My hospitals are only about 200 and 250 people. They're not a large hospital like Brookwood or UAB. We're very small. So they need to know what to tell those employees. So that communication and that investigation gets the ball rolling and gets the claim off on the right foot. We're wanting to make sure that communication starts from beginning to end, whether it's communicating with the employee, communicating with the HRD, communicating with the medical providers, and making sure, again, that we're communicating ethically. Because when I say that, I've seen some of the emails that some of my adjusters have sent over the years, and well, I'll leave that as it is. The adjuster's job is to be objective. God, I know that's hard. Some of these people call me in the office too, but your goal is to be objective and help them navigate the process. Your goal is to help us as the employer to make sure we're following the law. So sometimes I'm sure that is a very thin line, but it's one of those ones that when you find yourself at that, I don't know what to do. What should you do? Anyone? Call a friend, call your manager, call your manager's manager, and sit down and say, okay, this is the crossroads I'm at. Let's power solve. I'm gonna add to that.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges that individuals face, actually, is that we want to be knowledgeable, we want to be successful at our job, and sometimes we feel like that means looking like we're doing that job independently. And the truth is, the most successful people in all disciplines are those that are able to draw from the experience of those that have gone before them. Not necessarily from a tell me what to do perspective, but the ability to say, this is what I did when I went through a novel situation, because frankly, these claims are very rarely exactly alike. Now, I work specifically with catastrophic claims. So those can be very, very complex. There are a lot of layers. There's the medical layer, there's the psychosocial layer, there's trying to get somebody back into a community with needing a lot of resources. And they're coming from a rural community that there just isn't anything there. So the folks that have gone before me, folks that have managed things before I have and have come into contact with other situations, not necessarily this exact situation, but how did you think through that? Can you give me some advice on how I might approach this? Or where can I go to find out something additional? As a provider, we get calls all the time that's not what I do. But being involved in organizations like this has given me the opportunity to interact with individuals from a lot of different disciplines with a lot of different experience. So if I don't know where it is, I do know how to find it. Your peers are very, 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 that's a resource that you absolutely cannot discount how important that is in a successful career. Because if you had an ethical claim, if somebody was charging that you were unethical and you're able to demonstrate and you want to document what you do in any situation that is well, you want to document everything anyway, because we got lawyers in this room.
Hey, the first thing I tell everybody is document, because if it wasn't documented, it never happened.
But
So
if
then
you
again,
are-
we might have a problem again.
That's true. And if you are sitting in front of a judge and you have documentation that this was a train wreck, y'all. But these are the steps that I went through, and this is what I did to try to address this, that you did absolutely everything you could do to stay within the bounds of your requirements of the law and ethics, and also to do what's right for the client, then you're always going to come out to the better. So definitely reach out. You know, this room is full of folks. Tonight, when you're over in the reception and you're watching people put like corn dogs into their face really fast, like pick the one that does the best. And that's the one that you want to call on that choking claim that happens down the road. So yeah, always call on your friends.
Yes, and going back to what she said about documenting, stick with facts, because nothing will be worse than trying to produce your documentation to the judge and it has your opinion of what you think of that person. That's never good. So if you were in here this morning, you heard Fred and Clay talk about some of the pitfalls, you know, bad faith, wrongful denials, those kind of things. And I think we have come to a more litigious society, and I think there are plaintiff attorneys out there looking for whoever they think they may can rake under the coals or over the coals, excuse me, to get what they want out of it. So he also mentioned not paying benefits according to an order. And he even mentioned that's an ethical issue today. So those are things to think about from the adjuster perspective. You know, are you paying benefits? Are you paying them timely? My adjusters that work for me across the country know my biggest pet peeve is not to pay my employee. If we're under an order, please don't stop paying them, because I don't want to be in front of a judge and I don't want to be like, oh my God, here's Encompass Health again. I had one judge know my name and my company name every time I came in front of him. And I was like, whatever we have to do not get me back in front of the judges. I want to be a gag order on my name. So it's not a great place to be. So keep it in mind, the adjusting 101, those are the things that will get you into trouble and get you sideways.
Now, can I say something there? So, and I don't know if it was Davita or Diane. So we take these little rides in the car from the Cracker Barrel to wherever we're going to see Tracy in Montgomery, right? Davita and Diane and I. And so I get the opportunity as a provider to see the other side, because they kind of forget I'm there, which is a little bit unusual for me because I'm loud.
Yeah.
But I enjoy
she's
this
tall.
opportunity for, did you just
Yeah, I just called you tall.
pot in the kettle? Anyway, I get the opportunity to listen to the adjuster side of managing these claims. It's been very valuable to me, honestly, because I think that as a provider, we don't always get to see kind of all the constraints and the boundaries that you're up against. We're just talking about, hey, this person who's not answering my email or who won't approve X, Y, and Z. And one of the situations that came up, and I don't know which one of you it was, but had an injured worker that was not getting their checks. Now, the checks were written, the checks were mailed. It was you. It was Davita. And I'm going to comment not just because she's sitting here, but what I heard was, these are the things that I did to make sure that this individual got what they needed. Even though I can document that I did what my job requires, the bare minimum isn't necessarily what you need to do. And so you go, so sometimes you have to fight the U.S. postal system. Blish.
It's not always ethical.
Well, it does both, and it's okay to do both. It's okay to cover your butt and be ethical at the same time. As a matter of fact, I highly recommend it. So, I mean, that's just something that you have to think about sometimes. It's like, yes, I did my job, but
You
this
got to
is-
see how the hot dog was made.
oh, Lord. Yeah.
So as we go through the continuum of claims, we'll move past the adjusting. And unfortunately, they do take a hard turn into the legal realm. And then we interact with attorneys. And everybody loves to drive down the interstate and see who the injured worker could pick for their options. So we have Mr. Shannara or the Hammer. I mean, their picking is, I mean, like if you ride down 20 from Birmingham to Atlanta, I mean, I think there's only one breakage of billboards in there that there's not one attorney of some kind on there.
Oh, that's a driving game in my family. We count the billboards that are not attorneys everywhere we go.
That and license plate tags. I know we
Yeah.
have to play that game now. Thank you. So attorneys get in trouble if they don't communicate. And you know, that goes both ways, right? Plaintiff to their client and then us. Because nothing will make me more upset than an attorney trying to settle a file without me giving them authority. And yes, it's happened. So communication, that is their duty to us. Their duty is to be transparent. So, you know, sometimes I wonder, this whole advertising thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure they say no representation or something, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay. Did you breathe? Anyway, apparently there's something about their advertising that they have to watch out for. So the question is, do they do it? And how does anybody know if they've done it? Because they're supposed to be ethical and they took an oath to do that. So again, not a lot of times do you see our attorneys out there advertising on billboards. I wonder what they would think.
They just give us pens. This is,
Could you imagine if it was a Shannara billboard and then like a Carl Allison billboard and then. So I can only imagine sometimes what that would look like. Can you imagine Shannara driving down the interstate? What? The guy going against me has a
okay,
billboard.
we need
now.
to explain that. So for those of you who are not from Alabama, who's not from Alabama and have no idea what we're talking about?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so Alexander Shannara is the largest owner of Sign Real Estate in the state of Alabama. And that he advertised on his law firm on so many billboards that he had to buy a billboard company. So if you get a sign, you're renting it from Alexander Shannara. Yes. Yes. So I learned this because a friend of mine was in, his daughter was in a class with Shannara's nephew who hides his last name for that purpose.
Okay, is anybody from Florida? It's equivalent of Morgan and Morgan
Yeah,
for the people.
yeah. And it's, I think that Shannara is in so far into advertising that my Mobile people may tell you, I think he has a float in the Mardi Gras parade.
That's because he has an office there. I know the head of that office. He's a
Yeah,
Shannara
they
too.
back there, yes. So that is a blanket advertising that she's talking about where there's just an immersion. And so I had an injury and I've seen these commercials that say, I'm going to get $1 million for my broken pinky finger, my carpal tunnel, you know, and they come in not listening because they've been misinformed. Because the communication is everywhere from a medium that we can't control.
Or how about better yet, they go, I can't get control of my client. They have unreasonable expectations. How many times that happened to you in a mediation? And you wonder what they told them day one. And then especially when you come in with this beautiful surveillance and their claim value went, and then they have some splaining to do like Lucy. So also, you know, an attorney has a right to make sure they're handling the money correctly. And they can't fraudulently bill and they have to do conflicts checks. I got caught in the conflicts checked and one of our defense attorneys couldn't take my claim that I wanted him to defend because they had another client they were fighting in their general area. So they also have a huge list of things that they have to follow. And they have to be careful about the information that they get. And that's one thing we didn't talk about on the adjuster side too. Workers' comp is not covered by HIPAA, right? Everybody knows that. We say that all the time, right? But that doesn't mean we need to put it on a billboard like Mr. Shannara does. And it means we only need to share the information on an as need to know basis. Thank you. On a as need to know basis. And honestly, guys, my team only has access to the claim information. Not all of my 151 HR directors. Why? Because they don't need to know everything. They need to know what the return to work slip says. And that's it.
Well, and that's even though workers' compensation is exempt from, you have access to information, it does not change the HIPAA requirement of need to know. You have that information, but you also have the responsibility within your company and within the claim, how you communicate that information, email, phone, are you talking about it out in the community to protect that personal health information, even though you have a right to it. So, your person that does your housekeeping doesn't come in on listening to a conversation about somebody else's injury. You do have to be very diligent in how you manage that information. And that is an ethical onus that we all have to kind of do behaviorally, technologically. 100 years ago, we carried around a file. And as long as you knew where your file was, you're okay. Now your file is on your phone.
And how many people like to look over people's shoulders while they're on their phone? Phone etiquette leaves a lot to be desired. So as we're making it through a claim, the next person we get involved is the medical case manager.
And okay, so as I'm not a case manager, but I am a big fan of case managers, not because they send me referrals, but because the most successful clients that I have worked with have had a good case manager on the claim that made sure they were getting what they needed, but also that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Because we tell people all the time, we can have all the best tools. We can have the highest technology. We can have the latest science. But if we give you those tools and you choose not to use them, they're not going to do you any good. So that's when the role of a case manager comes in to kind of coordinate all of that, because you have people some people have never been in contact with the medical system. I mean, have you had those claims where this person's never been to a doctor? We handled a claim when I worked for Health South out of North Carolina, where a gentleman was hit in the face with a 2-ton door. It had been tethered and broke loose and hit him. Well, when he gets to the hospital and they're trying to do some kind of reconstructive surgery, he had never been to a dentist. All of his teeth were rotten and they were afraid that there would be some increased risk for infection. And so they took all of his teeth out. So sometimes this is the first time they've ever had any kind of interaction with other than just going to the doctor and getting a tetanus shot because you stepped on a nail or something, like fell off your bike. And so a case manager, having someone that has medical knowledge, but also has some training to help you coordinate resources, is very important. But there becomes kind of the case managers walk a fine line. Where does the check come from? Who pays you as a case manager? So I like the people who pay me. And I'm not saying that because they're sitting in the, okay. I want to do a good job for them. But as a case manager, your job is to make sure that that injured worker gets what they need. You're kind of trying to make sure they get better, but also make sure that those resources are spent in the right way. Not too much, not too little, just right. And so it's very, very important that on both sides, as kind of the legal side, the attorneys and the adjuster and the business side of the employer, they remember that this person's job is not necessarily to be your yes person. Their job is to coordinate care. But as a provider, it's also not their job to get us whatever we want. It's their job to get what the worker needs. And so it is very, very important that when a case manager is assigned, that they are communicating clearly with the worker. This is what I am here to do. I am not here to get you signed off for a lot of money. I'm not here to advocate for you to go to the Mayo Clinic. That's not what I'm here to do. I am here to make sure you get what you need, but also to the employer, to the adjuster and the case manager, this is what I'm doing, X, Y, and Z. This is why I am doing that.
And make sure you say it in a way that's objective.
Yes. So, and how many people in here are 100% objective? So y'all tell the truth at least. So I'll give you an example of when I was not objective. We had a young man that was in a car accident. This was back in the early days of my career before I got old. And as he started really to wake up, he starts telling me this story that, and mind you, I had to be upfront objective with this gentleman because he rolls into my office and he has a tattoo on his arm that says FTW. Now you can do the math on what that stands for, or you can Google it, but don't Google it on your work phone because it'll get you in trouble. What it means is that this gentleman is a member of the Aryan Nation. Now I'm a little offended by that. But that doesn't change the fact that he has a need. It doesn't change the fact that he is impaired and that I have to be able to deliver adequate services to him. And these nurses come into contact with that every day. People in living situations or of backgrounds that they just don't agree with. So dealing with your own kind of reaction to somebody is a form of objectivity that you're going to have a natural reaction, but be able to recognize that and correct it so you can do a good job. So as he started waking up, he would tell these stories. And when you work with head injury, there's a term called confabulation, where they will tell you some of the best stories that never happened. But they believe that they are true. They are not lying. It seems real. And he's telling me this story. And the problem with it is that it's consistent, that he was sexually molested. Now, he now has a guardian because he's not mentally capable of managing his own affairs. And the person that molested him is his guardian. Now, as a provider, my background's psych. I'm a mandatory reporter. And this is, even though he's an adult, I still have an obligation to report this. But this is a situation where the law has said that person is in charge of him. So how do I handle that? And how do I stay not violent when this gentleman comes into my office for family education, the guardian? Because I'm not objective there. I now do not like you. That's just how it is. And that's where communication with people around me, there was actually a case manager on that claim, and it was not a workers' compensation claim. It was actually private insurance. But I called her up and I said, okay, I have this situation and we're gonna have to think through this. And I'm shady. I'll just tell you, sometimes you have to do half things to do the right thing. And so what we decided, the quickest way to handle this, to keep this guy safe, was to report, but also ask permission from the guardian to speak to another member of the family. And so the gentleman's sister came into the office and for family education, because of course they granted permission for us to talk to his sister. And I start telling her what has been coming across my desk. And she started crying. This lady was 35 years old and had been carrying that since she was 14 and she had to walk into a court and tell a judge, this happened to me for the first time in her life. And so it's very, very hard to be objective when you're looking at something that breaks your heart. It's hard when you don't like somebody, because let's be honest, you're all gonna have clients you don't like. Some people are just annoying. They don't listen. They don't read the directions. They don't listen to anything you say. The ones that you do like are sometimes even more difficult to be objective with because you're invested in that. And so you have to be able to check your own objectivity in each one of those situations and be able to kind of stay in the lines. Go above and beyond, that's fine, but don't go too far. Because in that situation, that could have risked my license. And I still have to be able to work because, like the case managers, to do good, you have to do something. So
I was going to add, the nurse case manager's emails can be produced in most states. So that's something to think about. what they write in their emails can be discoverable. So the written communication can be a terrible thing, because when I say they can be produced, you really don't want the plaintiff attorney having one saying, Susie came in smelling like blah, acting like blah, and did blah. Got to stick to facts, got to stick to the facts.
Well, and how you write things is also very important. The objectivity in what you write is very, very key when it's produced in front of somebody else. And this is not a judgment call. This is a description. You know, that there are things that we say in private sometimes that you go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or I should have said that a different way. And that's definitely true professionally. You want to have anything that comes out to be said in a way that if other people heard it that are above you, they would say, okay, I see why they said that, and that's fine. And you certainly don't want anything crazy in writing.
So one thing, case managers communication, some states, if you have other people in here, and for kind of just a global thought, in Georgia, the case managers have to CC the plaintiff attorney along with us. So they see every bit of that communication. So sometimes people need to remember to write their emails like their boss is going to be on every one of them.
Are you looking at me? My boss reads my email. Yeah. You know, there is an onus of all of this. You know, we go through however many years of high school, and for some of us college, and then post-secondary education. And some of us have better written skills than others, but all of us can write a simple sentence. And to be able to communicate what it is and why, what you did and why you did it, works for everybody. And as a provider, it is very important communication, and you hear that at each one of these levels, from the employer, from the adjuster, from the attorney, the case manager, and the providers. Being able to effectively communicate is one of those things that's going to help you get what you need. You know, we have to remember as providers that we are a tool. We're a part of the system that will get this person kind of back where they need to be. And so you have to be able to communicate. And this is particularly for what I do is very important because it's complicated. Everybody in here has been, you've had an immunization shot when you were 4 years old, or you went to the dentist once, or that's an experience that we all have. Most of the folks you will come into contact with have never been in the hospital because of a high velocity impact and a brain bleed. So being able to sit down with family members and educate them, being able to sit down with our payer, our funder source, and say, okay, this is our map of where we're going. These are the steps we're going to take to get there, and this is what it's going to cost you, is very, very important. We can't just decide to do things because they sound fun. You have to have a reason.
So I hired a case manager once, and it was in the Panhandle of Florida, and the employee was very upset about this case manager being assigned to her case. And she's a nurse, so I mean, she understands the medical field. And so the HR director called me and she was like, hey, will you talk to this employee? And I was like, yeah. So I get her on the phone and she was like, what? I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you sending a nurse to go with me and babysit me? I am a nurse. I understand. I said, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. That's my fault. Tracy had nothing to do with it, which is her HR director. I said, I did this because this is what's happened to you throughout your case. And I said, this has been going on a while. And she said, yeah, it has been. I said, I want to speed up the approval process so that you get your injections timely, then you get your follow-up set up at the same time, and it's approved because the nurse case manager can do that. She was like, oh, I like this idea. And I said, also, if you have a concern or you're having an issue, typically my nurses can get to the doctor or the nurse that's the sidekick with that doctor quicker than you can, even though you are the patient. She was like, really? And I was like, yes. She was a fan of me ever since. And when she got better, she emailed me, thanks for the help. So sometimes it's just explaining it and trying to be transparent. And I said, I understand you thought Tracy did that, but that's my job. So I'm sorry that happened to you, but let me tell you why it happened. I'll tell you, I found out early on, my first job was with Alagasco, that's now Spire. And I found that my guys didn't speak medical terminology. And we had this one wonderful doctor here in Birmingham who's no longer with us. He now works in Nashville or retired. I don't know which one now. Dr. Lee. Love Dr. Lee. He was a great upper extremity specialist, but he didn't really talk. And so they would go in there and they're like, he didn't say anything to me. And one of them asked me if he spoke English, because his parents are from Korea, but he's always been an American. I said, yeah, he speaks English. He don't talk very much. That's why you have a nurse case manager. And they're like, oh, okay. So, and then I had a couple of doctors that they're like, he don't speak my language. And I said, I understand, that's why your interpreter is your nurse case manager. And that gave them a lot of that anxiety bring down when that happened. And a lot of times they would got to where sometimes they would even ask for the nurse case manager they had before. So nurse case management has a place. Again, they do have some potential ethical trip ups along the way, but seeing them work with the provider sometimes can create some issues as well. You know, a lot of times we send them back to ask other questions that sometimes can change what was talked about in front of the doctor. Their job is to follow up and let that employee know what happened after they left.
But as a nurses, case managers, rehabilitation specialists, the CDMSC, all of us have a different code of ethics that require do no harm. They require that we provide some degree of autonomy with clients. They have to have some decision-making process or participation in the process that makes decisions about their health that comes into conflict with the law that says the person that's writing the check basically determines what doctor you go to. You know, what's your first line of care. And so we have to be very, very careful about how we handle those situations, because we all want the same thing. And I think, Tracy, can I borrow a story from you? You okay with that? So this is the flip side of when you're not going to make somebody happy. There was a young man that was one of a file that was referred to me for evaluation. And I don't get to see people very often that I actually think could go back to work. You know, I tell people that's not really an expectation of the population of the people that we help. But this young man actually probably could have at some point, and he could have gone back into the community and been a successful member of his family and of his close community. But there was just some things about him that were improving in a way that led me to believe he may be able to go back to work part-time at some point if we do the right things at the right time. I accept him. The nurse case manager is on board. The adjuster signs the agreement that says, absolutely, we want to do this. And it's a huge financial investment that we're talking about here that nobody fought on the front end, but the family decides that's not what they want to do. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. You know, most people haven't come into contact with a catastrophic brain injury, so they don't really know kind of what they're dealing with. But under normal circumstances, a plaintiff's attorney is going to say, take all the treatment you can get. Everything they'll pay for, you take it. But in this situation, the plaintiff's attorney said he doesn't want to do that. And he called me, explained that he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want therapy. He wants to be at home with his family. I said, you understand that where he lives, he can't get outpatient therapy that will meet his needs. You've already tried that. It won't work. And you understand that if he doesn't get therapy now, the longer this goes on, the more difficult it's going to be to rehabilitate him. And he's going to kind of just get stuck there. And he said, well, I don't understand who told you that you could talk to him in the first place. And I said, well, you just let him make a decision about where he can go. He's the one that told me I could talk to him. And his mother is the one that asked me to come to their house. If you'd like to see the messages that she sent me, giving you the address and telling what time, I have all that. And he said, well, here's what I don't understand. I really don't understand. what are your credentials that say you can make a recommendation that he needs an inpatient? Okay, fine, 23 years, 2 degrees, this many patients, this many have gone on to do X, Y, and like, I can tell you my history if you really need to know it. And he said, well, that's fine. He doesn't want to go. And he's not going. But why can you call his case manager? Why did you tell the family they had to call his case manager? Because he doesn't have to call his case manager. I said, nope, he sure doesn't. But he has a physician's order on record that says he needs an inpatient admission. And so until that order is rescinded, he can't get outpatient therapy. His adjuster can't give him the next best thing. So he needs that case manager to intercede for him. Oh, and he hung up. Right? And I think Sean Cole was the one that mediated that particular situation. And she came to me and she said, well, let me just tell you, he said you knew what you were talking about, but he still doesn't like you. And I said, well, that's not the first time that's been said even today. So I'm okay with that because I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't step outside my bounds. I did what was right for the client, but the outcome still was not what we wanted it to be. You know, so even sometimes when you know what competence is so important across every one of those methods, from providers to case managers, it's competence is vital. If you're dealing with somebody that you don't know what this is, you've never seen this before, get help or find somebody that knows how to do it. Because when somebody like that questions you, you have to be able to back up what you're talking about. You don't want me telling you how to compound your interest, because much to my father's chagrin, I cannot figure that out. But I know brain injury. And so, you know, you being able to do, I did what I needed to do. The adjuster did the right thing. The case manager did the right thing. The end result wasn't what we liked, you know, but that professional competence and that clear communication was vital in that situation.
So as we're moving along down this little path of the workers' comp claims, medical providers play a role. We talked about HIPAA earlier, making sure that they send the right documentation to the right people. Not too long ago, I had one of my medical providers send medical records to my HR director. That person was going through cancer treatment. In case y'all haven't heard, there's another EEOC charge availability out there called GINA, genetic information. They were surprised. And so we had to have a conversation with that provider. They only get return to work slips. So your provider should be your best friend and should be very helpful and help you move down that continuum of care, but they need to make sure they know who the right place to send the medical records to, the medical bills to, and the return to work slips to.
Well, I think that work in multiple states and dealing with people all across the United States, everybody's process, everybody's rules internally are different, and different states have different rules. So being able to communicate as a provider, what is it that you need from me? Because there is certain documentation. There is a need, you know, an adjuster has to be able to justify what they write a check for. So having us have an understanding and open community, this is what I need and this is why I need it. And also, this is what I can do and can't do. We had a request one time for, we have an injured worker that he is at MMI. He's been 15 years plus, and he is at a supported living level. He's not going to get better and go back to work. He's not going to go home. He stays where he is. He's stable. But this gentleman was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And that treatment was not covered under his workers' compensation claim. The wreck did not cause prostate cancer. That was his private insurance. But the carrier, the workers' compensation carrier, requested that we provide them his records for his treatment. And, you know, when someone refers someone to me, particularly a supported long-term living case, that you're going to be writing me checks for a long time, I want to be helpful to you. I want to be able to respond to you, any requests, get you what you need, but there is a limit. Because that's not a claim that you're paying for, so you don't have the right to that record. And also, I can't release third-party records. I can give you my records, but I cannot give you the records of another physician or another clinic or another therapist, or I can't do that. And so, you have to be able to say, I understand that you feel like this would be helpful, but at this time, my physician says that's not a part of his workers' compensation claim, so we can't release those records. So being able to say that and accept it, that, or if there is some reason outside of what we normally would do, this is why, and how can we handle that to get everybody what they need.
From our perspective, there are times that people end up with cancer and they're going through cancer treatment and it delays their treatment. But that doesn't mean we should have rights to that information. Now, I have asked questions about the drugs that they're on, or if we're trying to heal a body part while they're going through cancer treatment, is it going to slow down that recovery process? If it is there anything we can do about it? Probably not. Like in the state of Florida, I can't stop paying TTD because they have a baby or they end up with something else. If they're off work or I can't accommodate and they run into this certain medical condition, I still have to pay all the way through it. But what I will tell you is there are things you can do to help your claim along. Meaning, we talked about doing the right thing, maybe doing something a little earlier. So, you find out they have cancer. Maybe it's time to look at a bone growth stimulator, or maybe there's some other avenues you may need to take. We're not saying you don't need to understand that sits out there, but what you do with that information is what's important.
And at the end of the day, like we said in the beginning, we're all on the same team. I mean, sometimes it feels like we're wrestling a little bit, but we are all on the same team. Pretty sure everybody that has someone that has been injured in front of them wants that person to get better, wants them to do well. That makes us all look good. So, we have to kind of give each other that degree of grace when we're going into a discussion about somebody that, that we're all going the same direction. How can we all get there? And that, I think it helps us. It helps the worker. And overall, it helps outcomes to be able to kind of get everybody as a team going in the same direction.
So we wanted to give you an example. So I'm going to start with my case manager example.
Okay.
So I'm not kidding you. This actually happened to me. It was probably one of the most gut-wrenching, oh my God, what am I going to do next kind of scenarios. So this case manager goes in, sits down with this employee, and she starts talking to her about how she can work the system and she will help her. She starts.
All the case managers in the room just died twice.
I heard that.
I don't know.
All right. So as this plays out, then they start talking about how they're going to go. She's going to come up to her lake house and hang out with her, and what she needed to tell her doctor so she could get perm total benefits. Let me add to this. This lady was attorney represented, by the way. So she's given her somewhat legal advice, and she trash talks the insurance company the whole time. Anybody in here wonder how I know all this? The claimant recorded her, and her attorney had it transcribed. So I got the line by line by line summary of it, like it was a deposition transcript. And if you thought you got sick once, you flipped the page, page 3. It was 27 pages long. So in Alabama, I can record a conversation. So you never know who's recording you or what they're going to do with it. So need to be ethical.
You who follow me on social media, you will. Those of you that don't, was a little incident last week, had to take my mother to the hospital. And there were They're all laughing back there. There was a gentleman that came in that had broken his head open and put on a show in the emergency room. Now, you will notice now that when you go into emergency rooms in some physicians' offices, they very specifically have signs up everywhere that say no recording. Now, for my population, we actually encourage them to record, not because they're trying to catch somebody, but because they're not going to remember what that person said. So it's actually, you need to ask the doctor, hey, can I either take notes or record or something like that? So you do have to kind of be careful of what you say, because these days with the phone in the pocket or any number of devices, you know, we unfortunately in our business are sometimes measured by actions that are not ours, and had another provider that was caught on video abusing a client. And so now sometimes when you get calls out of that area, the first question out of their mouth is, well, but do you do that? They did it. Do you do it? So it's very, very important. And that's kind of our, from my perspective, as an example that we have run into, is that you get people that want you to say, I can fix this person. Pretty sure when you call me, you're not going to fix that person, not to 100%, because they are very, very complicated injuries. And so when someone asks you how much better are they going to get, you have to talk in very specific terms of function. We can be able to improve mobility, possibly to this point. We can improve their activities of daily living. We can work on their cognition and hopefully develop some compensatory strategies. But can you fix them? And you have to say no, because unfortunately, some of your competitors have told them, yeah, we can fix them. And I don't like to be the one that tells you I can't do something. But the truth is I can't sometimes. So that is something that we run into quite frequently.
One of the things I want to add, and we're going to wrap it up, make sure that who you do business with is also who doesn't create conflicts of interest. So sometimes you've got to really pay attention to those.
Well, and be transparent about it, because so many of us have different products. You know, there are some people only do PT and some people only do case management, but there are companies like you run into physicians who also have a dispensary.
Ooh, Florida.
Or they're moving into kind of wanting to coordinate care from a case management standpoint. And there's a lot of ethical trap that goes on with that. So you have to be very, very clear with everybody what you're doing, what your goal is, and how you're going to accomplish that.
So in conclusion, honesty and integrity lead you down your ethics path. If you break ethics, you won't look very honest, and you lose your integrity just like that. Have respect for others, be accountable, and try to be fair. Sometimes it's really hard, as we talked about being objective. But anyway, thanks again.
Thank you, Christy.